Welcome back to the Durst Show. Welcome back to me. I'm back from my wonderful ship trip in the Mediterranean. 8 glorious days on a friend's boat. I would never ever want to own a boat, but it's really really nice to have a friend with a boat. It was great, and we went to a number of ports, and we ended up in Sardinia, which is a beautiful, beautiful island. We were at Elba before that. I broadcast from Elba, but we then went to Sardinia after that, and then we got back yesterday. So a little bit of jet lag, but I'm feeling fine. So before we get to Epstein, I read something over the weekend which so upset me because it was said by a guy who I like as an actor. It was said by Mandy Patinkin. Remember him from The Princess Bride and from Homeland. He's a good actor. But what he said was just inexcusable and awful. He's very, very anti-Israel. He's Jewish, very anti-Israel, and particularly anti-Netanyahu. He really has BDS, BB derangement syndrome. But he told a story that is so disgusting and so despicable and reveals so much about him that I have to disclose it, even though obviously it hurts me to do so because I like his singing and I like his acting, but this is just inexcusable. He tells the story as if he's proud of it. Here's what he says. Um, I was on the podium with my baby son. Mario Cuomo was on my right. Ed Koch was sitting behind us, and a stranger was next to me. This was a rally against Soviet Jewry. I think it was in 1984 and 1985. I know because I was there. I was probably the leading lawyer in the country involved in defending Soviet Jews. In 1974, I'd gone to the Soviet Union with General Telford Taylor, the former prosecutor at Nuremberg, and I defended probably 100 people. I wrote a book about it called, along with Telford Taylor, called Courts of Terror. And I defended Natan Sharansky. I consulted with Andrei Sakharov. It was one of the most important parts of my life. And I spoke all over the world about Soviet Jewry, including in front of the United Nations on the day that Mandy Patinkin sang Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem. And here's how he recounts what it was. He said, a stranger was sitting next to me. I didn't know who he was, but he had a distasteful vibe. It's the kind of thing you hear anti-Semites say about Jews, racists say about black, sexists say about women. But he had a distasteful vibe. And I took my son and I moved him from my left between the stranger and me to my right arm. So my baby would be between Mario Cuomo and me, not between this man. And then he discloses who the man was. It was Benjamin Netanyahu. Um, and he is basically saying that he predicted or saw the vibe in 1984 or 1985 about Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, let me tell you what Benjamin Netanyahu was doing in 1994 and 1985 when Mandy Patinkin encountered him. He was Israel's representative to the United Nations, appointed by Shimon Peres, probably the most liberal prime minister in Israel's history. He was representing the state of Israel and the party, essentially, that was in control of the government, a left-wing party. He was a centrist, defender of Israel, a charming, handsome, very nice man who had just recently lost his brother at Entebbe. There was nothing about his vibe. There was nothing about him. Potemkin is either lying through his teeth. I hope he is. I hope that's what it is, because he's much more innocent if he's a liar than if he's a bigot. If he's not lying, if he actually sat next to him and said, "Oh my God, this man, I don't know who he is. I don't know, but a vibe. I'm moving my baby away." What a disgusting, disgusting thing to say. So Mandy Patinkin, you're off my list of good guys. You're now on my list of bad guys. You're either a liar or a bigot. But explain and justify how you can say that you had a distasteful vibe from a man you didn't know. What did he smell? He smelled like an Israeli. What about him was the vibe? Uh, Nobody else had that vibe, but you somehow saw into the future, and you understood better than anyone else on the face of the earth that this man is going to ultimately become the prime minister. He wasn't even in politics. Wasn't even in politics. He was a diplomat. I don't even think he was associated with a political party at that point. He was a diplomat appointed by the most liberal prime minister in Israel's history. But you sensed a vibe, a vibe. That's exactly what racists and sexists do. So shame on you, Mandy Patinkin. I hope you see this, and I hope you call me and tell me what you think. You're not going to like it, but I don't like it. And I think it's disgraceful that somebody would publish an account saying he moved his baby. You move your baby away from, people who are deeply, deeply offensive in a physical sense, or who have a reputation for doing terrible things. This was a charming, handsome diplomat whose brother had just recently died, and you sensed the vibe and you moved your baby away. Shame, shame, shame on you. Okay, so let's turn to the most popular issue today among conspiracy theorists, the Jeffrey Epstein case. I was involved in the case. I was his lawyer. I was the one who helped, along with 5 or 6 other lawyers, very prominent lawyers at big law firms. We arranged this so-called sweetheart deal. It wasn't a sweetheart deal at all. Jeffrey Epstein hated it, fired me, didn't pay me my fee, didn't want to have anything further to do with me, because he had to serve, supposed to serve a year and a half in prison, closer to a year, and he had to register as a sex offender. So he didn't like that. But nonetheless, I was his lawyer. Also that I was, as I've said from the very beginning, falsely accused. And then the woman who accused me came forward and acknowledged that she may have misidentified me and dropped all the lawsuits, and everything was resolved. I can't say anything beyond that because there's an arrangement where I said I wouldn't say anything beyond that. And I'm not going to say anything beyond. This is not about me. This is not about the accusation. I just have to, for obviously fairness, indicate that I'm not a neutral observer of this thing. But I know, all the facts. I know more facts than probably anyone else. I've seen the files. I've seen the documents. I have a file myself, this high, including, probably 1 million pages of documents. Most of it I don't even have anymore. Sent away with where my files go, to file heaven or file hell. I don't know. In Epstein's case, probably file hell. But I've seen everything, and it's a nothing burger. It's a nothing burger. Let's start about the client list. Now, when you say there's a client list, it makes it sound like it's a list drafted or written by Jeffrey Epstein saying, here are the men, in one case a woman, here are the men who I lent out females to have sex. There's no such list. It doesn't exist. It never existed. What there is an FBI report, or reports, maybe more, from alleged victims, indicating the men that they claim they had sex with. Okay, that list is redacted. The names have been whited out or blacked out. I know who they are because I was involved in the case. So I know who these whited out or blacked out names are. I can tell you a lot of things I can't tell you because I can't tell you things that are bound, that are subject to court sealing. I can tell you there's nobody on that list that is currently in any office or in any position of current prominence. But I know who the people are on the list. Some of their names have already been made public. Some of their names have presumably, I'm not sure, not been made public. I know of at least one case where there is a name that was redacted by the judge. The judge wouldn't allow it to be revealed. And this is a person who's accused of having sex with one of the people through Jeffrey Epstein. And I also know of material that has been redacted by judges, more than one judge, that contain negative material about accusers, about people who accused other people. I'm not going to get into that, but that's a fact. And so there is material that's been redacted, but it hasn't been redacted by the Justice Department. The current Justice Department over Pam Bondi had nothing to do with it. They don't even know the names. I know better than they do because they don't know the names because they just got involved in the case. I've been involved in the case for years, since it started in 2005 or something like that. So it's 20 years. But they didn't do the redaction. As far as I know, they've published everything they have, but they can't violate court orders any more than I can. So they can't give you those names that have been redacted. I'd love to, but I can't. As I've said from the very beginning, I want every piece of information out there, every accusation, every accuser, everything about the accusers, everything. I want everything out there. And the media can probably do that if they went to court and sought in the name of the First Amendment, in the name of freedom of speech, to have unredacted these names and the information. There's a good chance they would get it. But if they don't, at least we'll know who the responsibility is. It's with the judges. It's not with Pam Bondi or the Trump administration or the current FBI. Yes, it was the previous FBI that initially, either that or a judge, we're not sure who, whited or blacked out the names. I'm not sure who, but I've actually held in my hand the document, and I was able to, by extrapolating from other things that were written by other people and other testimony, I was able to figure out who all the names were. I was very interested in doing that because I was not included. I was not in the any lists of people. So I was very anxious to get all this out. I had a selfish reason for doing it. But in any event, that's not the point. The point is that that is not something the Justice Department did or really had any control over. So there's that. Then there's the accusation that videotapes have been withheld. Well, I know for a fact there are videotapes, but they're not what you think they are. What happened is Jeffrey Epstein discovered that money had been robbed from his living room desk drawer, along with a licensed firearm. And so he reported it to the Palm Beach police. This is way before he was ever accused of anything. He was on good terms with the Palm Beach police. He reported it to the Palm Beach police. He made contributions to the Palm Beach police. He made contributions to police departments all over. You can speculate why he did, but he did. And so the Palm Beach police came to his house and they installed a video camera underneath the desk or somewhere. And there were videotapes surveilling whether or not this guy or woman, we don't know who it was, who stole his money. I think they finally found out who it was. It was a man. I think he was fired, but who stole his money and his gun. So there was that videotape. Were there videotapes of any of the bedrooms in his house in Palm Beach? There were about 5 bedrooms. Each was a suite, a bedroom and a bathroom. I stayed in that suite. My wife stayed in that suite. My grandchildren, my children, we all stayed in some of those suites. When he was not there, he lent us the house for a period of time when my granddaughter had a soccer match. So I know the layout of the house pretty well. I hope there were video cameras, but I am not aware of any. So I think the idea of video cameras having recorded information so that he could blackmail people, there's just no evidence to support that. And I don't believe it's true. Then there's the Tucker Carlson allegation, which is the most absurd of all. He worked for the Mossad. He worked for the Jews. He worked for Israel. And don't call me an anti-Semite just because I say he worked for Israel. No, you're just wrong. You're just dead wrong. He didn't work for Israel. Let me tell you how I know. I was his lawyer along with 4 or 5 other lawyers. If he had worked for any intelligence agency, the Mossad, the Shin Bet, the CIA, anything, any intelligence agency, the first person he would tell would be me and the other lawyers and say, hey, get me a better deal. I don't like this deal. I'm going to jail for a year and a half. I have to register as a sex offender. I worked as an intelligence source. So get me a better deal. He didn't tell us that. We asked him everything. We asked him, what information is there conceivably that could help you? We asked him whether people he could testify against. That's what lawyers do. You debrief your client. And if there was any conceivable possibility that he worked for any intelligence agency, we would be the first people who know it. I have since checked with my sources in Israel, pretty good sources in Israel, pretty good sources. I was one of the lawyers for the Mossad when when 5 Mossad agents were captured in Cyprus. I was asked and I accepted as a pro bono client, and I represented. I have a letter from the head of the Mossad thanking me for the work I did to save people because they were ultimately released. So I'm not going to disclose who my sources are. I can only tell you I have pretty good sources. And everybody is clear that he did not work for the Mossad. A former Mossad agent who was a former prime minister of Israel, Bennett, confirmed that today. And he's a very honorable guy and a truth-telling guy. So there is no possible truth to that fact. It's just absolutely false. Then there's the elephant in the room. Was he murdered? Did people who he had something on come and murder him? First of all, if he had something on anybody, it would be in tape or in writing, and killing him wouldn't have helped very much because that would have just made sure that they were searched for and the material would have been found. No, but he wasn't murdered. He committed suicide. I have my doubts about it initially because he potentially could have gotten bail. Probably not, but he possibly could have gotten bail, and I would have thought would have waited at least until bail was denied before he permanently took his life. And so I've never believed. I've always had doubts, but I've never believed that he was murdered. In any event, how do you get to murder somebody in a federal prison? It's not easy. It's not impossible. Whitey Bulger was murdered by fellow inmates, but I don't think he was murdered. But I do think he was helped to commit suicide. I suspect he paid off some of the guards, and I think some of the guards have been fired. Remember, the cameras were turned off. His cellmate was sent to a different cell. And the guards were sleeping or off duty or just, they weren't there at the relevant periods of time. So I do think that there was negligence, but I don't think he was murdered. I don't think anybody would really have a motive to murder him. First of all, if he were to tell on anybody, who's going to believe Jeffrey Epstein? He would have to have proof. And if he had proof, then the proof would probably still be there. I mean, that's all circumstantial, but I don't think that he was murdered. Then there's the issue of money. This is something that Tucker Carlson raised as well. Where did he get all that money? Why did people pay him so much money? Well, apparently he was very good at advising people in manner that avoided their taxes or reduced their taxes. And I know that there are some people who paid him enormous amounts of money, including Leslie Wexner. Enormous amounts of money to handle their finances. These are multi-billionaires who want to pay the least amount of taxes and want to get the highest return. But most important, they want to preserve their wealth. And apparently Epstein was pretty good at that. He gave me one bit of financial advice, one bit. And I invested, I don't remember, $100,000, $150,000, and I lost every penny of it. And then the guy who I invested with decided to, he was so upset that he had lost all my money so quickly that he compensated me. But I don't think Jeffrey Epstein was a particularly great financial planner. Maybe he was. But obviously, Leslie Wexner thought he was, and I don't see any other reason. Tucker Carlson seems to suggest that the Mossad paid him. First of all, the Mossad's not going to go around creating close to a billionaire. Jeffrey Epstein was never quite a billionaire, but he had many hundreds of millions of dollars. He was probably very close to being a billionaire. Maybe he was with his properties. But Mossad's not going to do that. And so he made his money. I don't know whether he made it legitimately or not. Economically, I have no idea. I had no contact with him about that. But he didn't get his money from the Mossad. He didn't get his money from the CIA. And I don't know what he would have to trade. I mean, the argument is he extorted people. And it's possible that he extorted people, but I just don't think the Mossad or the CIA would be interested in somebody like him. I think the way that rumor started about him being a Mossad agent is that his earlier girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's now in prison unjustifiably, in my view, but her father, Robert Maxwell, who was publisher of major papers in England, may very well have worked for the Mossad. When he died, he was given a burial in a very, very exclusive place in Israel. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, did work for the Mossad. But that doesn't mean that Jeffrey Epstein, I'm not sure Jeffrey Epstein ever met Robert Maxwell. That, Maxwell died maybe before. Maybe he did. I don't know. But I can't imagine that there was any connection between Jeffrey Epstein and any intelligence agency. And I conclude that beyond any doubt. Look, there are other issues and other questions as well, but I just think that the media loves conspiracy theories. And, what they hate is when their conspiracy theories are undercut by stubborn facts or the absence of stubborn facts. I think it was John Adams who talked about stubborn facts when he defended the people who were accused of the Boston massacre. So the stubborn facts get in the way of these theories. I don't think there's anything to this. And, like they say, when they have a traffic accident, nothing to see, move on, nothing to see. That's my final analysis of the Jeffrey Epstein current case. There's really nothing to see here, and we ought to move on. And I hope we will. But there's no harm in further investigations. What there is harm in these crazy conspiracy theories that make no sense, that are undercut by the evidence, and that are used by people to attack their enemies. Each side uses conspiracy theories against their enemies. I just watched Jake Tapper, who's generally a fairly responsible journalist, interviewing a conspiracy theorist, basically on CNN, and seeming to shake his head and agree with some of the conclusions. I just don't think there's evidentiary support for that. So, I hope someday the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth will come out about everybody and everything involved in the Epstein case. I'm not worried about it, and in fact, I welcome it. And so we'll see. But just any newspaper in the world. I got calls today from India, from England, from Italy, from all over the world. Oh my God, you were Epstein's lawyer. Tell us, is there anything to this? And I haven't commented much on it because I just don't think there's really very much to comment on. So moving on. Let's turn to letters. So when I did my interviews from the boat, I didn't realize that there was a mirror, and my wife was lying in bed, and I thought I had turned the TV camera or the camera away from the bed, but apparently it caught her. So here's a letter. We assume that the person in the bed is the reflection in the mirror behind you is your wife. Yes, it is my wife. We were together on the boat, and I showed her this letter. She was mortified, but shouldn't be mortified. She's beautiful and gorgeous, and all there was a little shadow of her, but we'll make sure not to do that again. Thank you for mentioning Leonard Cohen as someone who should have been nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature. I agree 100%. To me, he was a prophet. His writing and his music are so moving and thought-provoking, some just so incredibly human. I don't generally feel deeply the loss of entertainers, but with Cohen, I felt that I knew him and he had been a big part of my entire adult life. It took me a very long time to digest his voice. I also do like Bob Dylan, also a prophet of sorts. I think both are very underrated. Well, Bob Dylan gets the Nobel Prize. I don't think he's underrated, but I do think that the prize should have been given to three or four people rather than just one person. Here, I got a whole bunch, probably the same person. The Nobel Prize should go to Francisca Albanese. Francisca Albanese is one of the most bigoted, anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Western, horrible people at the United Nations. She is the rapporteur on Palestine, and she always writes things that are libelous and slanderous against Jews. And so if she might get the Nobel Prize, and it would be awarded by the heirs of Yasser Arafat, because that's who would be the one who she would be closest to, although she's not herself a violent terrorist. She is a supporter of violent terrorism. So I can't imagine anybody worse to get the Nobel Prize than her. Trump should reject the prize after they give it to him, unless Obama gives his back. Another one. I believe Trump would rather have real peace than this award. I have no doubt. I have no doubt about that. And I hope that he does achieve real peace. Right now, Israel has made an offer. The United States has made the same offer. Israel and the United States are on the same page, and Hamas has turned it down. So let's point the finger at the right party and make sure. Remember, Hamas thinks it's winning this war. Why? It's losing a lot of people, but they don't care about that. They know that every time Israel kills a civilian, they win in the court of public opinion. I was on Piers Morgan today, and I made that point that the Hamas strategy, of course, is to get Israel to go after its soldiers who are underneath hospitals, knowing that if they kill civilians in the hospitals, that will hurt them in the court of public opinion. So their strategy is to maximize the number of civilian deaths they can attribute to Israel. And if the media and the world gives into that, we're just going to see more terrorism. We're going to see more kidnappings and more October 7th. Of course, that's what they have promised. A number of people suggested Doctors Without Borders. I have renamed that organization Doctors Without Morals. They are, again, one of the most rabidly anti-Israel, anti-Semitic organizations in the world. They have already won the Nobel Prize, and you don't take it away. But Doctors Without Borders is a horrible organization. They've become a front for Hamas. Okay, they say Dershowitz lobbied preemptive presidential pardon to Maxwell. No, I never did. I never discussed it, never mentioned it to anybody. I would think that it would be a just thing to do to commute her sentence to time served, but I have never lobbied anybody on behalf or filed an application for her. What do you have to say about about the IRS allowing churches to make political speeches? Well, it's interesting. You know, the First Amendment shouldn't impose restrictions on churches. And what the IRS has said is, if as part of your preaching, your religious doctrine, it naturally flows that you should support this candidate or that candidate, that they would not lose their tax benefits if they do that. It wasn't an open invitation to get up there and say, we think you ought to vote for Trump. Trump is the only guy who, would be justified under our religious views. No, I don't think they've actually said that. So, all right, finally, you were correct on the Beatles. No way Trump gets a Nobel. If they award him one, he should decline. He's not going to decline, and I don't think they're going to award him one. Oh, let me give you my final one. I always like to have at least one like this to show there's still such bigots in the world. This is, to me, from Jerry G. Hey, neo-Nazi Capo Al. Hey, neo-Nazi Capo Al. It sure ain't going to be you or Trump. You know, you could say it's not going to be me or Trump. That's all fine. But to call me a capo, to call me a Nazi capo, that says a lot more about you than it says about me. I'll continue to read nasty attacks on me and some positive ones, and continue to try to explain things based on my experience and knowledge. See you all tomorrow.